I trusted them because they were family. While I was battling cancer, they smiled, cooked meals, and said they'd take care of my home. I thought I was lucky to have such support. But the truth hit me like a truck. They weren't helping. They were waiting for me to be too weak, too drugged up, too vulnerable to fight back. And by the time I stood on my own 2 feet, again, my house, my sanctuary of 30 years had already been stolen. But they forgot one thing: I wasn't dead yet. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, this story will hit home. Stick around to see how I turned the tables in court, and feel free to like, comment, or share your own experience below. My name is Brenda Holloway. I'm 55 years old, single, and I've lived in the same cozy little house in Cedar Hills, Oregon for over 30 years. It's not some luxury estate, but it's mine. A 2-bedroom ranch with yellow siding and a white picket fence nestled between pine trees, and a garden I tended every morning with coffee in hand. My late husband Michael and I bought it when we were barely out of our 20s, and even after he passed from a heart attack 10 years ago, I stayed. This house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was where we raised our daughter, where we laughed, grieved, healed, and grew. I worked as a school librarian, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me a sense of purpose. I loved the quiet rhythm of life. Books, flowers, casseroles on Sundays, and chatting with neighbors over the hedge. I wasn't rich, but I was content. But life has a cruel way of testing that contentment. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with early-stage lymphoma. The doctors caught it early, thank God, but it still meant I had to go through chemo. Fatigue, nausea, hair loss, the whole 9 yards. The treatment plan was aggressive, and my doctor strongly recommended I take a medical leave from work to focus on healing. Living alone, I knew I'd need help. My daughter Rachel lived out of state with 3 kids and a full-time job. She wanted to come, but I insisted she stay put. Take care of your babies. I'll be okay, I told her. I meant it. I didn't want to be a burden, so I reached out to a few relatives. My cousin's daughter Tasha offered to step in. We hadn't been close. She lived in Portland, only about an hour away, and we mostly saw each other at weddings and funerals. But she was warm on the phone, enthusiastic even. I've got flexible hours working remote. I can stay at your place, make meals, drive you to appointments. Seriously. Aunt Brenda, I got you. She called me Aunt Brenda, even though we were more like distant cousins once removed. But I appreciated the sentiment. It felt comforting, familiar. Family. And when she showed up with her boyfriend Daryl, tall, polite, the silent type, I told myself I was in good hands. At first, things were fine. She cleaned the house, stocked the fridge, even tried to keep the flowers in my garden alive. When I had to stay overnight at the hospital, she and Daryl made sure my cat was fed and the mail was taken in. It felt like a blessing. Chemo hit harder than I expected. There were days I couldn't even lift my head, and the painkillers made everything hazy. I remember drifting in and out of sleep while people talked around me. Sometimes Tasha would bring papers for me to sign, just some insurance stuff, she'd say. I didn't question it. My vision was blurry, and honestly, I was just trying to stay alive. She cooked bland soups, brought me blankets, kept my phone charged. I felt so grateful. I even remember thinking one night as I lay in bed with the sound of rain tapping on the windows that I was lucky. Lucky to have people who cared. After 6 long months, the treatments ended. My hair had started to grow back. My color returned, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I woke up with energy. My doctor said I was in remission. My body was healing. My spirit, too. I was ready to return to life. But when I got back home from my final follow-up visit, something felt off. The locks on my front door had been changed. I stood on the porch, holding my keys, confused. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe Tasha had the locks replaced for safety. I rang the doorbell, knocked. No answer. After a few minutes, I went around back and used the spare key hidden in the garden gnome. The key fit. Thank God. But the moment I opened the door, an alarm blared. A loud, piercing shriek that echoed through the house like I was an intruder. I rushed to punch in the old code on the panel. It didn't work. Within minutes, a squad car pulled up. The officer, a young guy with a buzz cut, stepped out and asked me what I was doing. I told him this is my house. I live here. I've lived here for decades. He looked at me with polite skepticism. Ma'am, according to county records, this property belongs to Tasha McNeil. I laughed. It had to be a mistake. A clerical error. I told him I had the deed. I'd lived here all my adult life. But when I called Tasha, she didn't pick up. When I drove to the county recorder's office, I saw it with my own eyes, my home signed over to her 2 months ago. My signature was there too, only I didn't remember signing anything. I sat frozen in the parking lot of the county records office staring at the copy of the deed transfer in my hands. My name was there printed and signed in smooth, confident strokes, but I didn't remember signing it. I didn't remember anything about transferring my house. The date on the document, right in the middle of my 3rd round of chemo. That was the week I'd been admitted overnight because of a fever spike. I could barely sit upright, let alone sign legal documents. My hands were trembling. I drove straight back to the house, my house, and pounded on the front door until Tasha finally opened it. She was dressed in one of my old cardigans and had the nerve to smile like nothing was wrong. Tasha, I said, holding up the document. What is this? Oh, Aunt Brenda, she said, cocking her head. You did sign it, don't you remember? You said you didn't want the stress of homeownership during your treatment. You were really out of it, but you insisted I take it over for now, said it would be easier. My mouth went dry. I never said that. I would never. This house is everything to me. She sighed, pretending to be patient. You were on so many meds, you probably forgot. We didn't want to upset you while you were healing. But look, it's done now. And Daryl and I have plans to expand. We've already started talking to contractors about knocking out that back wall. I felt like I'd been slapped. You're renovating. Well, it's ours now. I mean, technically, I guess it's still your house in a way. We just legally own it. I looked around the living room. My furniture had been rearranged. My framed photos were gone, replaced by art prints I didn't recognize. The rug I'd bought with Michael was rolled up and shoved in the corner. The house smelled different too. No longer lavender and lemon, but something sharp and artificial, like one of those plug-in air fresheners that tried too hard. I want my house back, I said, voice low but firm. Tasha's expression shifted. Her smile faded, replaced with something harder. Look, I know this is emotional for you, but legally everything's in place. You gave it to me. And unless you've got proof that you were coerced or incompetent, there's not much you can do. I felt my knees wobble. I turned and walked out heart pounding. I went to a lawyer the next morning, my old neighbor's cousin, someone I trusted. He looked over the documents and shook his head slowly. Everything appears legal, he said. Unless we can prove fraud or manipulation, it'll be tough to challenge. But I was heavily medicated, I insisted. I wasn't in my right mind. He frowned. Do you have any medical records showing you were incapacitated that day? Witnesses video? Because without that, it's your word against hers. The weight of it hit me then. I had lost my house, not to a stranger, not to a scam artist, but to family, a family member I had trusted with my life when I was at my weakest. The next few weeks were hell. I stayed in a cheap motel just outside of town while I tried to make sense of what happened. My savings were thin. Most had gone toward medical bills. Rachel. My daughter was devastated when I finally told her, but she had her hands full with her kids and couldn't fly out right away. I didn't want to tell her at first. I felt ashamed, embarrassed, stupid. Tasha and Daryl posted photos online, smiling selfies in my kitchen wine glasses clinking in my backyard. One post read, "Turning our dream home into something even better. Had blessed, had new beginnings." I wanted to scream. I tried going back to the house again, just to grab a few belongings. I'd left behind a necklace from Michael, some journals. But the locks had been changed again, and when I knocked, Daryl answered the door with a look that could freeze water. "You're not welcome here," he said flatly, and shut the door in my face. I called the police. They told me it was a civil matter. I called another lawyer. He wouldn't even take the case. No one believed me. I felt like I was losing my mind. I'd beaten cancer, but now I was being crushed by something worse: betrayal. Nights were the hardest. Lying alone in that motel bed, staring at the ceiling, I kept wondering, how could they do this? How could anyone do this to someone who trusted them? I replayed every moment of my treatment, trying to remember if I had signed something, trying to pinpoint where I'd gone wrong, how I could have been so blind. I thought about just giving up, starting over somewhere new, renting a little place and pretending the last few months hadn't happened. But something in me wouldn't let go. I'd survived chemo. I'd survived the grief of losing my husband. I had lost a house, yes, but more than that, I'd lost my dignity, my voice, and I wanted it back. The days blurred into one another like dirty watercolors left out in the rain. I moved from motel to motel, scraping together what little I had. My hair had started to grow back a soft silver fuzz that made me look more like myself again. But inside, I felt like a ghost. I wasn't Brenda anymore. Not really. I was just someone who used to have a home. I tried contacting more lawyers. Each conversation ended the same way. "The paperwork looks solid, Ms. Rollins. Without hard evidence, we have no case." Hard evidence. As if memory didn't count. As if trust betrayed wasn't a crime. I started losing weight again. I wasn't eating, couldn't. The stress sat heavy in my stomach like a stone. I'd pick at salads or microwave oatmeal in motel lobbies, but most of the time, I just drank coffee to keep from collapsing. Some nights, I'd sit in my car outside my old house watching from down the block as lights flickered in the windows. My windows. Tasha had painted the shutters blue. Blue. Michael and I had picked out that forest green together in 1999. He always said it looked peaceful like home. The blue looked smug. One afternoon, I saw them throwing a party in the backyard. Kids running around the lawn I'd mowed for 30 years, music playing, people laughing in the space where I used to plant roses. I felt something inside me crack. I called Rachel that night and broke down on the phone. "They're living like I never existed," I whispered, "like I was just a placeholder, like my life doesn't matter." "Oh, Mom," she said, her voice thick with tears, "you matter so much. Don't let them do this to you. There has to be something we can do." I tried everything I said. No one will help me. There was a pause. Then Rachel said, "Let me make some calls. There are people who fight this sort of thing. Predatory inheritance cases, elder abuse, something, elder abuse." That phrase stuck in my head like a thorn. Was that what this was? The next few days, Rachel sent me links articles, nonprofit organizations, online forums. I read stories from other people, some older, some sick, some grieving, who'd been manipulated out of their homes or assets by family members. I wasn't alone. That realization, for the first time in weeks, made my chest feel less hollow. I reached out to a group called Safe Seniors Legal Aid, a nonprofit that specialized in helping older adults reclaim stolen assets. I didn't expect anything. I'd been shut down too many times, but within a day, I got a call from a woman named Judith. Her voice was calm and firm. "Brenda, I want you to know that what happened to you is not okay, and we're going to help you." I almost dropped the phone. Judith asked for everything: documents, photos, emails, texts, medical records. I spent 2 days digging through my boxes and emails, piecing together the puzzle of what had happened. I found a text Tasha had sent my daughter the day I was admitted for my chemo complications. "Aunt B is out of it. Docs say she might not remember much. Gonna handle house stuff while she's out." That message, casual, thoughtless, was the first real crack in their story. Judith and her team worked fast. Within a week, I had a real legal team behind me. Volunteers. Retired lawyers who'd seen this kind of betrayal before and were angry. Angry for me. But as the legal wheels started turning, things got worse on the outside. Tasha must have heard I was fighting back because one afternoon, I got served with a restraining order. She claimed I'd been harassing her and loitering outside her property. The paper said I had to stay at least 500 feet away. My house had become enemy territory, and I had officially become the villain in their story. The restraining order rattled me more than I thought it would. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a lie, written in ink, backed by a court stamp. And it felt like the world was siding with them. That night, I broke down again. Not just crying, sobbing. Fists clenched in the sheets of my motel bed, face buried in the pillow so no one could hear me. I thought of Michael, of the way he used to hold me after long shifts, the way he'd say, "We built this life, Bren, brick by brick, and now it was all stolen by someone who called me aunt." I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window until sunrise, watching the dark fade to pale blue, and something shifted inside me. I wasn't done. I didn't survive cancer just to roll over for a spoiled little liar in my house. They took my home. But they were about to learn what it meant to steal from someone who had nothing left to lose. The court date was set for early March. I circled the day on my calendar with a trembling hand. Just seeing it marked down made my stomach twist. It was one thing to suffer in silence, but now I had to stand up in front of a judge and prove I'd been betrayed. Judith and her team prepped me like I was going into battle. They explained everything what the defense might say, how they'd paint me as confused, mentally unstable, even manipulative. They'll try to flip the narrative, Judith warned. You're the sick aunt who didn't remember signing documents, and they're the caring family who just wanted to help. I didn't sign anything willingly, I said through gritted teeth. I was on chemo and sedatives. They tricked me. We believe you, she said, and we're going to prove it, but not everyone did. At the preliminary hearing, Tasha and her lawyer were already in the courtroom when I arrived. She wore a beige suit, hair curled, looking every bit the dutiful niece. Her husband, Travis, sat beside her with that smug half-smile he always wore when he thought he was untouchable. She didn't even look at me. When the judge asked for initial statements, their lawyer spun a tale so polished it almost sounded noble. Ms. Rollins was seriously ill. My client stepped in to manage her affairs as any loving relative would. The transfer of the house was legal documented and uncontested at the time. We believe Ms. Rollins is simply confused and confused, I whispered to Judith, rage bubbling in my throat. They're trying to plant doubt, she whispered back. Stay calm. But I wasn't calm. I was boiling. When it was our turn, Judith stood and delivered a quiet, powerful rebuttal. We have reason to believe the deed transfer was signed under medical duress and deception. Ms. Rollins was not mentally competent at the time due to her ongoing chemotherapy and sedative treatment. We have records, text messages, witnesses. The judge listened, impassive. Then he said he'd allow the case to move forward. No dismissal. I exhaled for the first time that morning. But that was just round one. In the days that followed, Tasha and her family went on the attack. They posted online about elderly relatives with memory issues, implying I was unstable. One of their friends left a comment, sounds like someone's trying to steal the house back after giving it away. Sad. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake them and say I didn't give it away. You stole it. Even worse, I heard from one of my old neighbors that Tasha had been going door to door telling people I was losing it, that I had imagined the whole thing. It was character assassination, subtle but relentless, and it worked. People I'd known for years stopped calling. Some crossed the street when they saw me. I was becoming a pariah in my own town. There were days I thought about giving up, days when I stared at motel walls and thought, is it even worth it? The lawyers, the hearings, the humiliation. But then I'd remember the smell of my roses in June, the way the sunlight hit the kitchen window at 5 p.m., Michael's laughter echoing down the hallway. It was my home, and I wasn't going to let them erase me. Then came the deposition. I sat across from Tasha in a sterile conference room, lawyers on both sides, a court reporter typing every word. Judith had prepared me, but nothing could have readied me for how cold Tasha looked. There was no guilt in her eyes, only calculation. They asked me if I remembered signing the deed. I remember being in a hospital bed, half-conscious with tubes in my arm. I remember voices, someone handing me a clipboard. I remember Tasha saying, "It's just insurance stuff, Auntie. Don't bite to worry." I signed because I trusted her. Tasha snorted. I turned to her, eyes sharp. You knew I didn't understand. You knew exactly what you were doing. She shrugged. You're just mad you changed your mind. I never had a mind to change. You took advantage of a sick woman." Her lawyer quickly interrupted, but the words were already hanging in the air. A few days later, Judith called me with news that hit like a thunderbolt. "Brenda, we subpoenaed the hospital records. The timestamp on the signature you gave matches exactly with your medication chart, specifically when you were under a double dose of Ativan and Dilaudid. You couldn't have legally consented to anything in that state." I blinked. "Wait, does that mean—" "It means we have a real case. And the judge will likely order a forensic handwriting analysis and an evidentiary hearing." That night, I cried again, but not from despair. From relief. Someone finally believed me. The truth was starting to pierce through the lies, but the road ahead was still long. More filings, more motions, and Tasha was relentless. She hired a PR firm to protect her reputation. She even filed a countersuit claiming I'd defamed her character. Judith told me not to worry, it was a common intimidation tactic, but it still shook me. "You doing okay?" Rachel asked one night on the phone. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm not quitting." That's my mom. Sometimes, all it takes is one person believing in you to keep going. That, and knowing that one day I'd walk through my front door again. Not as a guest, not as an outsider, but as the woman who built it and reclaimed it, brick by brick. The day of the evidentiary hearing felt like walking into a final exam I'd been preparing for my whole life. The courtroom was crowded. Local reporters sat in the back row, pens poised. My story had made the community news. Elderly cancer survivor claims family stole her house during treatment. Suddenly, the whispers around town weren't about how crazy Brenda had gotten, but about whether I'd been betrayed. Tasha arrived in head-to-toe designer with Travis at her side and two lawyers trailing behind. She looked annoyed, not anxious. Like this was a tedious errand she couldn't wait to finish. I just sat there, quiet but grounded. I had Judith. I had the truth. And I had receipts. Literally. The court began with our forensic handwriting expert, a quiet man with wire-rimmed glasses who carried a stack of enlarged documents. He walked the judge through each comparison, my real signature on bank papers, my will, my lease agreements, then the signature on the house deed. The angle is inconsistent. The pressure weakens unnaturally around the final stroke. These are signs of motor impairment. "What causes that?" the judge asked. "Commonly seen in patients under heavy sedation or narcotics." In my opinion, the signer was not fully lucid. The courtroom murmured. Judith stood. "Your Honor, we also have Brenda's hospital medication chart from the day she signed. She was administered a double dose of Ativan and Dilaudid 45 minutes before the time-stamped signature." Tasha's lawyer objected. "Circumstantial," but the judge allowed it into evidence. Next came the text messages. Judith had pulled old backups from my phone, including one thread where Tasha messaged her husband. "She won't remember a thing. We'll handle the papers tonight." Travis's face went pale. Tasha didn't blink. She looked at the floor like none of this mattered. Then came my turn. I stood and looked at the judge. My voice didn't tremble. I trusted my niece with my home. I was too sick to understand what she was doing. And she didn't ask, she tricked me. "You gave her power of attorney," the defense argued, "only to pay bills and manage appointments, not to steal my life out from under me. Look at what I built: 30 years of mortgage payments, repairs, gardens. And they put me in a motel, like some stray dog. That landed." I saw the bailiff shift uncomfortably. I saw a tear slide down Judith's cheek. But Tasha? She crossed her arms, eyes cold, untouched. She thought she'd still win, until the surprise witness, an old nurse from the oncology wing, Anna. She had remembered me. Judith had tracked her down and gotten her subpoenaed. Anna took the stand and said clearly, "I remember Ms. Rollins being unusually groggy that afternoon." I asked if she understood what she was signing, and she said Tasha said it's just hospital stuff. That raised a flag for me. "Did you say anything?" Judith asked. I mentioned it to another nurse, but the visitors insisted they had legal authority. We were overworked. I still regret not pushing harder. Tasha's lawyer objected again, but the judge waved him off. And then the final blow. Judith pulled out the video. A short, shaky clip from a baby shower Tasha hosted in my house just a week after the signing. One of the guests, her cousin, had posted it on Instagram. In the video, Tasha was laughing with a glass of champagne, and you could clearly hear her say, "Brenda's so doped up, she doesn't even know she gave me the deed. I should have done this years ago." Silence. Dead silence. Then the judge looked up, eyes sharp. "Counsel, I want both parties back here in 2 weeks, and I strongly advise the defense to consider a settlement." Tasha went pale. Outside the courtroom, she stormed past me like I was invisible, but she wasn't untouchable anymore. 2 days later, her lawyer reached out. They wanted to settle. My terms were simple: full restoration of the deed, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and monetary damages for emotional distress and illegal occupancy. They pushed back. I didn't budge. I'd fought too long, lost too much, and cried on too many motel pillows to give them an easy out. And finally, they caved. A formal statement was released in the local paper. "We acknowledge that the transfer of Ms. Brenda Rollins' property was executed under conditions that did not meet ethical or legal standards. We regret the distress caused and have taken corrective action." It wasn't an apology, but it was a confession. A few weeks later, the check came in, a hefty one. Enough to not only repair my house, but to buy another if I wanted. But I didn't want another house. I wanted mine. I moved back in on a crisp April morning. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains as the moving truck arrived. Some waved, some looked sheepish, but one man, a retired teacher who'd lived 2 doors down for 40 years, walked right up and said, "We were wrong not to ask your side. Welcome home, Brenda." I smiled, not out of pride, but out of peace. Later that afternoon, I took a walk in my backyard. The roses were gone. Tasha had ripped them out and installed a fire pit, but I'd replant them. I'd bring every inch of this place back to life. And as I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, I watched a sleek black SUV pull out of the cul-de-sac. Tasha's. They had sold the mansion and moved to a rental outside town. Rumor had it Travis was under investigation for real estate fraud. The karma train had no brakes. And me, I had my house, my name, my dignity. And the knowledge that justice wasn't just a word, it was something you could fight for and win. A month after I moved back in, I planted new roses in the backyard. They weren't the same variety I had. Before, these were brighter, hardier, and resilient against frost, just like me. I remember standing there, dirt on my hands, the sun kissing my face, thinking I almost lost this. All of it. Because I trusted the wrong people. But even then, I didn't regret being kind. I only regretted not being more cautious. Neighbors started stopping by again. Some brought casseroles. Others came with awkward apologies. I didn't hold grudges. I just remembered who was silent when I needed voices. One evening, I hosted a small gathering on the porch. Judith came holding a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. We sat for hours listening to crickets talking about everything except court. And then she said something I'll never forget. Brenda, you didn't just win a case. You reminded all of us that the truth may bend, but it doesn't break. Not when someone fights for it. She was right. Justice wasn't loud. It didn't always roar. Sometimes it came in the form of a porch swing, a garden reclaiming its color, and a deed finally resting in the hands of the right owner. As for Tasha, I heard she moved out of state. Last I saw, her name came up in a news article, something about mismanaging funds at a startup. Karma doesn't knock. It walks right in. I didn't cheer when I read it. I just whispered, I told you I only ever wanted peace. You're the ones who chose war. Then I went back to pruning my roses because I was finally home. And this time, no one would ever take it from me again.